Chapter 37. Robin. I took a position at the comm center that I'd recently crept past in a trash can, sitting now on an alien chair that looked more like a weightlifting bench, and I prepared for an exciting phone call. Vitter had already showed me which buttons to press. He was away in search of somewhere to wash off the festive shrimp paste, while I called the Turtledillo authorities. "Greetings. What is the nature of your emergency?" "Oh." The dispatcher on the video screen broke off when she saw a human smiling back at her. I waved. "Hello! Long story, but the camouflage smuggler's base in the footprint of the moon has been neutralized. We could use some help before they all wake up." "Yes, of course," she said, regaining her composure. "Roughly how many smugglers have been apprehended, and are they off-worlders or rockbacks?" I gave her the rundown with my best estimate, which I felt was pretty accurate since I'd seen the room where the baddies were being stored like so many bug-shaped sculptures. Rumble's crew was currently sweeping the compound for any holdouts. The dispatcher gave me good news in return. "There are already camera drones on the way to you, since we received a report about the battle there from civilians who managed to capture an off-worlder." "Oh, they did it! Hooray!" I sat up straighter. Was that enough evidence to prove that Earth had nothing to do with the smuggling? "Yes," she said. "The off-worlder's confession was accepted." "Wahoo!" I cheered, waving my arms in a most unprofessional manner, but I didn't care. The Alliance was saved. The dispatcher withheld judgment. "We're trying to get in touch with the authorities at the space station," she said. "I understand there's something of a crisis underway there, so we may have a bit of a wait, but I'm sending our forces to you. Please hold." When the screen turned a swirling blue, I collapsed back onto the chair bench in relief. We were off the hook. I wouldn't get sent home in shame, to a lifetime of regrets and sadness, and neither would my coworkers. No word yet about the animals in the woods, but I was willing to bet we'd be allowed to catch them soon. I listened to the action outside while I waited for the dispatcher to return. A snatch of English sounded like the other human telling Dragon that something was safe for him to eat. The deep voice was Rumble's, and the higher one was Zephyr, following him around like a smitten puppy. Somebody fired a paralysis gun, which made me worry, but it was just a single shot with no voices raised, so I relaxed again. I turned my head in time to watch a pair of Rumble's people drag yet another frozen bug alien toward the holding room. The shot must have been just in case. The screen chimed, and I sat up to greet the dispatcher with questions about rabbits. Her answers were encouraging. "We should have an override approved soon for the sovereignty of the forest," she told me. "It's linked to the one allowing the forces to enter the footprint of the moon, which should be just minutes away. I'm not sure about the space station authorities." "What's that?" She turned to speak with someone off-screen. "I've just been told that we did get in touch with them, and they're changing route." "Oh, good," I said, just as people outside started shouting. "What's that?" I asked, though the dispatcher couldn't know. I yelled toward the corridor, "Hey, what's happening?" Nobody answered me. Then I remembered the security cameras. "Where is it?" "That was one of these other screens." "Aha!" I left the chair and the worried dispatcher to get a close look at the view outside the compound. Multiple spaceships had landed, though no one had gotten out yet. Rumble's people were threatening them and demanding that they declare their allegiance. I rushed back to the screen. "Hey, if that's the space cops, can you relay a message to them that there are probably only two people here who can translate between them and the locals? One's me, and the other is a narrow alien with just one arm and leg. I gotta go in case she's not already out there. Thanks, bye." I left the screen on because I'd been taught never to hang up on emergency operators. Then I ran for it because I didn't trust anyone involved not to get trigger-happy. Roka stood at the entrance, doing her best to communicate with both groups at once. Her grasp of rockback was pretty good for someone obviously new at it, but this was a tricky proposition. I jumped into the fray. "Guys, put the guns down. Hey, in there. It's safe to come out, just don't shoot anyone. All the bad guys are in a room that-a-way." The tentacle dude joined us and greeted the space cops like old friends, which made everything easier. Eventually, all the twitchy people stood down, and we showed the nice folks with space cuffs toward the holding cell. They were a mix of humans, tentacle types, and one blobby fellow that I knew better than to stare at. I wanted to. Water wills were rare in my experience, but this one probably got that a lot. As I looked away, stepping aside to let them work, I wondered just where Rumble's people had disappeared to all of a sudden. Nobody was paying attention to me anymore, so I went and looked. Following voices, I reached the side door just in time to see a tender goodbye between Rumble and Zephyr. Lots of caresses with all those arms. Rumble said something quiet that sounded like a promise to meet up later. Then he climbed into the seat of an exceptionally spangly hoverbike that wasn't made for him. He had to crouch there with his lower arms grasping the cushion and his upper arms working the controls. I had just enough time to take in the awkward sight before he blasted off across the landscape with all his cronies behind him. They raised a racket, as well as a dust cloud despite the hover engines. I coughed and waved it away, squinting. Not a space cop in sight. I wondered if they would even care that these ne'er-do-wells had stolen a whole fleet of off-world transportation. Zephyr waved goodbye into the dust with 3 hands, the last one shading his eyes. "Those bikes don't turn invisible," he told me, "but they're much better than anything local. Rumble considers them fair payment for helping defend everyone's territory from these evil interlopers." "Yeah, guess I can't argue with that," I said. "And they can't get into space, so probably no one will hassle him for dangerous tech." I gave Zephyr a sidelong look. "I'm surprised you didn't go with him." The little accountant gave me an affronted look. "I have authorities to talk to," he said. "I want to see that everything gets taken care of." "Also fair," I said. The dust cloud thinned, though I could taste the grit in my teeth already. "Come on, let's make sure the space cops don't leave before talking to the local authorities. They shouldn't be long now." "Yes, I see the drones." Zephyr pointed out a handful of flying specks approaching from the left, while the dust trail led right. "Let's go prepare a meeting." He scampered back inside, and I followed close behind him. The Turtledillo peacekeepers did arrive soon, with vehicles that didn't make a dust cloud, followed by news crews, with vehicles that did. And if I thought that was a circus, it was nothing compared to when the Seer ship touched down. I'd never seen these highfalutin supercops in person before. They were weird. Their ship looked bizarre from the start, made from some kind of liquid metal that moved like dignified black jello. It settled in for a landing without any visible propulsion system, and tendrils of ooze reached out like landing gear to guide it into place. The whole thing glorped onto the ground. Then a door unfolded into a ramp, and the Seers paraded out. And they had faces full of tentacles, because of course they did. Telepathic ones. I happily let the space station cops be liaisons. They probably had more to discuss anyway. I heard a snippet of conversation about reparations that the cops would have to make to gang members of a different species who they had shot earlier, and that sounded like a whole lot of not my problem. But then, of course, the Seers wanted to interview everyone present, and interview meant a telepathic face hug. I got in line between Zephyr and Dragon, doing my level best not to show any nervousness. Keeping Dragon calm was enough of a distraction. "This should be over soon," I told him. "They just want to see our memories of what the bad bugs did." Dragon nodded vigorously, shifting from one foot to the other. He signed with a grunt. He ground his knuckles into the dirt like he was giving it a noogie. "Yeah, me too," I agreed. Zephyr poked me in the back, a gesture that would have made a polite tap on another Turtledillo's shell. "Sorry," he said. "Is this process unpleasant?" "It shouldn't be," I said. "I've never done it before, but everyone says it's easy." Zephyr accepted that, standing as tall as he could while the Seers came down the line, and I hoped I hadn't lied to him. Dragon was eager to go first. I watched as the tall figure in dark, flowy robes placed hands on his shoulders and tentacles on his face. They were both still for a long moment. The only motion was the faint patterns on their robe, which moved in hypnotic spirals. Then the Seer stepped back and moved on to me. I put on an excellent act of pretending not to be terrified, if I do say so myself. I knew it was safe and civilized and very necessary right now, but some things will upset the human hindbrain no matter what. A bundle of wiggly tentacles coming at you was one of them. I closed my eyes. At the first touch, A wordless query popped into my head like someone inputting a computer search. My memory banks responded. I was treated to an accelerated replay of all that had happened to me in the last few days relating to the criminal ring that had caused so much trouble. Interesting to watch. I wondered what memories the other people in this lineup had to contribute, and what the seers thought of it all. I got absolutely zero feedback from the connection. Then it was over, with another wordless thought appearing in my mind, this one of gratitude. The tentacles withdrew. The seer stepped to the side and bent over Zephyr. My clothes were only a little damp with nervous sweat. I breathed deeply and answered Dragon's questions about tentacles. Further along the line, the other humans sneezed and muttered about allergies to alien plants. It was a lovely sunny day. After that, it devolved into a whirlwind of activity, most of which I didn't have to handle myself. The seers took custody of the criminals, vowing to work with the space station's police forces to round up the rest, many of whom had infiltrated the cops' ranks. Sounded like a right mess. But at least the station wasn't damaged. I said my goodbyes to the civilians who'd gotten mixed up in this before they caught a ride back home. I committed their names to memory in case I ever saw them again. "It was a pleasure getting locked in a room with you," I said, offering a handshake to my fellow human. Jacinta laughed. "Likewise." Khan's tentacle shake was unpleasantly squishy, but I'd had worse. Roka's single hand felt strange in a double-jointed way, and Vitor didn't even try. He just raised his pincer arms and exclaimed, "Hooray for all of us!" "Hooray!" I cheered. The whole group joined in, even Zephyr, who probably hadn't understood the words. Dragon roared. This meant we had to reassure more than a few onlookers, spacer and local alike, but it was okay. Then the foursome were hustled off into a ship, and some official-looking turtle-dillos ushered Zephyr, Dragon, and me toward land-bound transportation. I had a fleeting thought that the trip to the space station would be both farther and faster than the one we were about to take in hovercars. But for the first time in ages, we weren't in a hurry. How nice. Unfortunately, that was the only nice thing about the trip, since the rockback cruiser barely fit me, and Dragon had to ride in the jail cell in the back. It didn't take quite as much convincing to get him in there as I expected. He knew this was the first step toward going home. The next step was making it through the throngs of paparazzi who swarmed us at the Capitol. This time when Dragon bellowed, Zephyr and I just grinned. Our escort took advantage of the sudden gap in the crowd to direct us through a door that the news crews didn't dare breach. This building had been made with interspecies diplomacy in mind, so we had plenty of space to stand up. Vertically, anyways. The room was crowded with turtle-dillos in agrarian shell paint, which turned out to be my friends, the heroic farmer types. "You live," declared Beetle. "Well done." "Well done to you," I replied, "getting that smuggler to the authorities." Moondark raised her beak with pride. "I tied Draincoat around his head myself." "Your ruckus made a fine distraction," Beetle told me. Sunrise came trotting in with my coat, which the couple returned with fanfare. I thanked them and introduced Zephyr and Dragon, who they had politely not asked about yet. Our talk was interrupted by the arrival of some very high-ranking authority figures, a couple of which were even human. We went over everything again. I managed to ask a few questions in between answering them. Was the Alliance really safe? Yes. Well done. Were we allowed to catch the animals yet? Yes, and people were already working on it. A spaceship or two were lending their scanners to the cause. Fantastic. Was there anywhere I could get a change of clothes after the debriefing? We talked ourselves hoarse, at least those of us who understood the language. Dragon was offered cushions to rest on, and he took a nap at the side of the noisy room. I was more than a little jealous, but all this history in the making needed my attention. Finally, the authorities had talked to us enough. They moved on to make decrees and give a press conference or whatever, leaving us civilians with a promise of reimbursement for any material losses incurred during relevant adventures. Moondark looked particularly happy about that. When I remembered that my wallet and phone had been taken, I was too. A swarm of underlings took over. They made notes about expenses and contact information while human diplomats arrived to wake and escort Dragon away. He accepted this attention with regal aplomb, making sure to give Zephyr a pat on the head and me an overwhelming hug before he went. My back popped in 3 places. When I could breathe again, I said, "Goodbye. I hope you have a nice flight home. Lots of people will want to talk to you there." The gorilla nodded. "Dragon will write book about adventure," he said. "Be famous." "Fine plan," I agreed. He followed the diplomats away while Zephyr and I waved. The farmers were leaving out a different door. Time for more waving. And official-looking turtledillos announced that there were cars waiting to ferry me home and Zephyr to where he'd left his own car in the rough part of town. They assured him that any damage or loss would be covered. I thought privately that he might take the chance to go visit Rumble already, though it was none of my business if he did. "Well," Zephyr said briskly, "I guess I'll see you at work at some point." "Definitely," I told him. "I'll be around for as long as you folks will have me." "I dare say that will be a long time if the 2 of us have anything to say about it," he said, which got a smile from me. Even if this problem was too big for me alone, I thought, I didn't have to handle it all by myself. I'd stressed about breaking my track record of success in things I really threw myself into, but it had never been about my solo efforts. On Earth or light years from home, teamwork wins. I'd remember that next time. At the polite insistence of the waiting turtledillos, Zephyr led the way to the waiting cars, and I was happy to follow. To home and rest and rabbit catching and a long future as one of the few select humans on this alien world. I couldn't wait.